For as long as I can remember, I've been fighting off depression. Some of my earliest memories are of lying in bed at night, thinking about which kind of self-harm would finally make my parents take me seriously, though I never had the nerve to actually do it. What makes it even more confusing is that I'm their only daughter. I'm Summer, 29F, and I have one older brother, Jeremy, 30M. He's barely a year ahead of me, but it always felt like he was light years more important. I don't exactly feel jealous of him. I mean, he's my brother and I love him, but I've always been painfully aware that he's the golden child. Meanwhile, I've spent most of my life feeling like an accident they didn't know what to do with. My mom used to joke that she named me Summer because I was born in July during a heat wave and it was too hot to come up with something more creative. I laughed when she said it, but it stuck. When we were kids growing up in Phoenix, I remember my mom had this beautiful cherry red flip phone, sleek, shiny, and totally the kind of thing a preteen girl would dream of owning. My dad had his own phone too, of course, and back then, cell phones were still a kind of milestone, something you earned when you hit a certain age or showed enough responsibility. My parents told us they were getting new phones soon, one for my mom, one for Jeremy, and I'd get my mom's old one. I didn't care that it was secondhand, I wanted it so badly, I practically planned my life around it. One afternoon, I came home to find my mom sitting on her bed with Jeremy, unboxing a brand new phone. I remember the excitement bubbling up inside me. I thought, this is it. Dad got the phone. I squealed, climbing onto the bed. They didn't even acknowledge me. They kept fiddling with the new phone, figuring out its features. Eventually, they swapped out the SIM card from the old red phone into the new one. That was my cue. I reached out and picked up the old flip phone, smiling. "Can I have it now?" I asked, holding it like a treasure. "No," my mom said, taking it right out of my hands. "Dad didn't buy Jeremy one yet, so he's going to use this. You'll get a phone next time." "But you promised," I said, my chest tightening. "I said next time, Summer. Stop whining." Then, with complete detachment, "Go get me a glass of water. Add some honey." Jeremy didn't say a word. He picked up the phone, even though he clearly didn't like it. I knew he didn't want it, but he got it anyway. He always got it. And he never fought for me. Why would he? He was used to receiving. I was used to being passed over. When my dad finally upgraded his own phone a few weeks later, Jeremy had already managed to break the flip phone. So naturally, Dad gave his old phone to Jeremy too. And me? I was still phoneless until months later when they got me a basic prepaid phone from Walmart. It wasn't a gift. It was, "So we can reach you." To this day, I still feel that heartbreak like a bruise that never healed. It wasn't just the phone. It was all the other little betrayals, slights that stacked up until they became a part of me. But I didn't blame them. I didn't know any different. A few years later, we ended up at the same college in Arizona because Jeremy had to repeat a year. He moved into an off-campus apartment my parents rented for him, while I stayed in the dorms. One day, maybe 2 months into the semester, I stopped by to check on him. "Hey, Jeremy. What's up?" "Not much. Come on in." The place was a mess, dirty laundry everywhere, leftover takeout boxes on the floor, and a smell coming from the bathroom I didn't even want to investigate. "So this is the new crib?" I teased, looking around. "Yep. Home sweet home," he said, barely looking up. "You ever plan to clean?" "Yeah, eventually. Dad already gave me a whole speech about it." "Dad?" I raised an eyebrow. "He was here." "Yeah, earlier today. I didn't even know he was in town." Jeremy shrugged and opened a container of homemade food. It smelled like Mom's cooking. Her chili always had a particular smell from the cumin and garlic. He brought you food? Jeremy nodded, tossing a piece of meat in his mouth. Tommy and Brady are coming over to eat with me. Can you wash up the kitchen a bit before you leave? Wait, he didn't bring anything for me. Nope. Said this was mine. I tried to keep it light, even though my heart felt like it had taken another hit. Well, I'm starving, so I'm gonna go grab something. Just dropped in to say hey, not here to clean the castle. I'll tell him to bring you something next time, he said. Next time? I echoed. Does he come by a lot? Yeah. Pretty much every week since I moved in. That moment hit me like a punch. We'd been in school for 2 months, and my dad had apparently visited Jeremy every single week. Brought him food. Checked in on him. And not once had he come by the dorms to see me. Not even a text. Not even a gas station snack. And yet, I took it in stride. Because that's just how it had always been. Absolutely. Here's the continuation of your story, rewritten for a US audience while preserving the emotion and underlying themes of betrayal, gender bias, and awakening. I've incorporated subtle American cultural references and societal framing to keep it grounded in the context you're aiming for. It wasn't until 6 years later that everything finally clicked for me. By then, Jeremy and I had both graduated and were working. I had taken a job in Colorado to build up savings for a business I'd been planning for years. Jeremy, meanwhile, had already burned through several failed startups, all bankrolled by my parents. They kept calling it support or giving him a chance, but it was clear they saw him as their legacy. I was the insurance policy. My mom owned this old 2-bedroom house she'd snagged in a government auction years ago. It was in a cute little suburb about 30 minutes outside of Dallas. A real stroke of luck, she bought it for next to nothing. The only catch: the city had strict rules. The house had to be renovated and lived in within a certain number of years, or it would be repossessed. By the time she told me about it, there were only a few months left. At that point, I was still living out of state, but I called home often to check in. During one of those calls, my mom mentioned how stressed she was about the house. I really don't want to lose it, Summer, she sighed. But I just don't have the money right now to do the renovations. I paused. Then I said, what if I put up half the cost? We could fix it together. You could rent it out for a few years to make your money back, and when I move back, you can hand over the deed to me. Where would you get such an amount from? My mother asked, her voice keenly curious. At the office we get quarterly bonuses. I have been saving mine. With the 2020 vision of hindsight, I realized even then that I should not have told her about the money, but I was so used to being open with my family. My mother sounded relieved, but also annoyed. Oh, that would be perfect, she said. Send the money down. So I wired her a few $1,000s to get things started. And every time she came back asking for more, I sent it, until all my savings were gone. I didn't care. I believed I was building something of my own. A home to return to. A place that, for once, would belong to me. At the end of it all, I had paid for everything, even borrowing the last few thousands from my colleagues. A few weeks after the renovations were finished, she called me again. Her voice was a little too chipper. Hi, Summer. I just wanted to clarify something real quick, about the money you gave me for the house renovations. I felt a twist in my stomach. Yeah, I said slowly. Well, you were just helping out, right? Like, you weren't expecting the house to be yours or anything. My heart dropped. It wasn't confusion this time. It was clarity. Cold, brutal clarity. "No, Mom," I said, my voice tight. "We agreed that I'd help fund the renovations, you'd rent it for a while to cover your side and then transfer the title to me. After all, you did not even spend a cent of your money, I paid for everything. That was my investment." "Oh, come on, Summer. That's not what I understood. I thought you were just doing it for the family." "What family?" I snapped. "I made a financial investment expecting a return in a few years, not some vague, thanks. "Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you," she said flatly. "Your father and I have decided to give the house to Jeremy. He's the firstborn, and he doesn't have any stable income right now. That's that." I couldn't even respond at first. "You gave away my investment. That was everything I had saved." "Oh, stop with the whining," she said, her voice suddenly sharp. "Your tone is so annoying when you get like this. Your money isn't gone, you gave it to your family." "We had an agreement," I insisted, fighting to stay calm. "Where's it written?" "Where's the contract?" she scoffed. "You're the one with the college degree. You should know better. No deal is real unless it's signed, sealed, and delivered." That's when it hit me. This wasn't an isolated betrayal. It was a pattern. That weekend, I drove back home to Texas to talk to my father face to face. I hoped, stupidly, that he'd see reason. Instead, he laughed. "Don't be foolish," he said. "Why would we give you the house? It's a family property. It stays in the family. We're not selling it." "I am family," I said. "You're a woman," he replied, like that explained everything. "One day you'll marry and join another family. Why would I hand you property?" I had no words. My hands were shaking. I didn't cry in front of him, but I couldn't hold back the tears when I got upstairs. That conversation confirmed something I had always felt but never been able to admit: I meant nothing to these people. I wasn't a daughter. I was a utility. When I finally pulled myself together, I went downstairs to the kitchen where my mom was cooking. "Are you done talking with your dad?" she asked without turning around. "Then come help me chop the onions." "I'm not done," I said. "But I will be soon." I went back upstairs, grabbed some trash bags, and started packing up everything I'd left in that house over the years: childhood trophies, old journals, my winter coats. By the time I dragged the last bag downstairs, my dad was waiting by the front door. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I'm going home," I said quietly. "So you're just going to run away like a child because you got a little criticism?" "I want to get on the road before dark," I said, choosing not to engage. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw my mom standing at the front door. I didn't wave. I didn't look back. I had no intention of ever looking back again. Now that Jeremy had moved into my house and my parents had made it abundantly clear where I stood, I had no more illusions. According to our cultural tradition, at least how my parents interpreted it, daughters didn't inherit from their fathers. Maybe from their mothers. But modern families had moved past that. Fathers gifted property to daughters all the time now. Mothers made sure their girls had something of their own. But not my family. My parents weren't upholding tradition. They weren't adapting to the times. They were actively robbing me, in slow, calculated ways. While Jeremy got startup capital, a house, and their undivided attention, I had been supporting them financially since I got my first paycheck. And I mean really supporting them. My dad lost his job when his company downsized, and instead of retraining or adapting, he stayed home, living off what I sent. My mom, a public school teacher, barely made enough to keep up with groceries. And Jeremy? He had drained them dry with his constant failures. Yet they still believed he was the one worth investing in. When I got my first job, my father demanded I send him my entire salary, minus a tiny allowance for gas and groceries. He said, "You're a woman. Alone. What do you need all that money for? You'll go wild if I let you keep it. Better find a man fast." And despite everything in me screaming how wrong it was, I sent him half. Every month. Because I loved them. Because I was taught that was what daughters do. Because I didn't know I was being used. But now I do. It took me a while to settle into my own home after finally leaving my parents' house. At first, the silence was strange because this time it was final. It was really my home now, not my place to sleep during the working week. Unfamiliar. I was so used to the sound of someone calling my name, giving me orders, or watching me like I owed them every breath I took. But after a few days, the silence began to feel like peace. Like safety. I would sit in the middle of my small living room, on a second-hand chair I'd picked up from a local thrift store, and just breathe. No raised voices. No judgment. No expectations. Just me. And the sound of my heart beginning to slow, after years of racing. It was during one of those long, quiet evenings that the thought came to me. I had been sending every dime of my salary home, even my savings I had invested into the house were from my quarterly bonuses. Every month. Like a loyal little soldier fulfilling a duty. But now that I was paying my own rent, buying my own groceries, and taking care of myself, I realized I couldn't afford to be so selfless anymore. Not with people who saw my sacrifice as their entitlement. So, I made a decision. I didn't cut them off, no. I wasn't raised that way. But I reduced the amount I sent. I split it into manageable portions, some for them, some for me. For once, I put myself in the budget. I sent the new amount, with a polite message explaining the change. The response was swift. My father called and demanded an explanation. I have to recoup my investment in Mummy's house one way or another. I told him. I had to borrow money from colleagues which I must pay back too. The plan was for the house to be rented out, so I'm sure that there will be more income for you guys. My father's voice came back over the phone, barely controlled. I'm not renting out that house. I've given it to Jeremy and he has moved in. His girlfriend is pregnant and they need their own space. I was silent for a few moments. What was this liberty my conservative parents were showing to Jeremy? I'm sorry, Daddy, I spent everything that I had on the house with the expectation that you would rent it out and live on the rent for a few years before I moved in, and I would continue to support you. If I had not made that investment, I would have invested in shares or treasury bills so have some extra income. Now I have nothing, I have lost everything, so I have to find a way to start again. I will not have this job forever. I have to save what I can save before my contract with the company expires in a few years. There is no need for you to save anything, my father shouted, all pretense of control gone. Send your salary home, and find a husband to take care of you. He hung up, and a few minutes later my mother called. When I did not pick up, she called. Then she called again. And again. And when I still didn't answer, she sent texts. This is not acceptable. You owe us everything. You're being ungrateful. And then Jeremy chimed in. You're not a child anymore, Summer. Act responsibly. We're your family. I ignored them. That was my greatest weapon, silence. But ignoring them wasn't enough. That Saturday morning, I was lounging in my cotton robe, enjoying a cup of cocoa, when I heard loud knocking at the door. I opened it to find my mother and Jeremy standing there. No greeting. No smile. "Open the door," she said. I stepped aside. I didn't have the energy to fight. I thought maybe, just maybe, they had come to talk. To reason. I was wrong. They came to guilt, to accuse, to demand. They sat in my living room, turned their noses up at my modest furniture, and told me I was too proud. That we made you who you are. That you belong to this family, and your money belongs to us. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just stood, walked to my room, packed a small overnight bag, grabbed my purse, and left. I booked myself a room at a nearby hotel. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, and the pillows were soft. I ordered room service, took a hot bath, and spent the weekend pampering myself and sleeping. When I finally returned home Sunday evening, I braced myself for whatever mood they might still be in. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found. The door was unlocked. I stepped inside and froze. The house was empty. I stood in the middle of my ransacked living room, the silence around me ringing louder than any scream. My hands trembled, not from fear but from the weight of confirmation, that no matter how much I gave, how much I sacrificed, I would always be the well they came to draw from, never mind if it had run dry. I dropped my bag by the door and slowly made my way through the house, taking in every detail of what was no longer there. My favorite accent chair, the one I saved months for and bought as a reward to myself when I got promoted, gone. The artwork from local artists that made this place feel like mine, stripped from the walls. Even the scented candles I used to unwind after long days had vanished. It wasn't just theft, it was an act of erasure. They had tried to scrub out every trace of my identity in this space, as if I didn't deserve even that. In the kitchen, the stench of rotting food hit me like a slap in the face. I stared at the blackened pot on the stove, the spilled oil on the floor, the trails of ants marching to and from crumbs. My stomach twisted, not just from disgust, but from grief. This place had been my sanctuary. Now, it felt like just another place they'd claimed and defiled. I cleaned in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just wiped and swept and gathered what remained of the home I had built for myself, piece by piece. When I finally sat down, on the floor, because the living room was now empty of chairs, I felt a strange calm wash over me. This was my breaking point. But also, my turning point. That night, I filed a police report, not with the hope that anything would be returned, but to leave a paper trail. I took photos of everything, the missing items, the state of the house, the evidence that they had been here uninvited. It was time I stopped letting my silence be mistaken for consent. On Monday morning, I spoke with my landlord and changed the locks. I installed a security system with cameras, front door, back door, inside the living room. I made a decision: they would never again cross the threshold into my life without consequences. When my phone was back on, the missed calls and messages poured in, some from my parents, some from extended family members I hadn't heard from in years. Word had clearly spread. "Summer, how could you treat your family this way? Your parents did everything for you. You've changed. This job of yours has corrupted you." I didn't respond to a single one. Instead, I drafted a message and sent it to all of them. To anyone who feels entitled to my time, energy, or money, I owe you nothing. I have done more than enough. I have given more than I could afford. Going forward, do not contact me unless it is with kindness and respect. If you enter my home uninvited again, I will involve the authorities. This is not negotiable. Summer. They thought they had taken something from me. But what they didn't realize was that furniture can be replaced. Dignity? That I had finally reclaimed, and they would never touch it again. I took a few days off work, not because I was broken, but because I was determined. I spent the day replacing everything they had stolen. Not the exact items, no. I didn't want to recreate the past, I wanted a fresh start. I chose new colors, different styles, bolder patterns. I made my little home even more me than before. The next week, I resumed work like nothing had happened. But it turns out, my family hadn't finished yet. 2 weeks later, I was called into the HR director's office. I walked in nervously. He was seated behind a large desk, a printed letter in front of him. I recognized the handwriting instantly. My father's. "Please, have a seat," he said, gesturing politely. I sat down and kept my eyes on the desk. He cleared his throat. "This is unusual," he said, tapping the letter. "It's from your father. He's requesting that we transfer you back to your home state so that your family can, quote, keep an eye on you." I raised my head then and met his eyes for the first time. He was handsome. Sharply dressed, but kind in the eyes. I'd seen him around the office complex a few times. We'd shared the occasional glance in the elevator or hallway, but never words, until now. "Ignore it," I said calmly. "Please. I have no intention of returning to my home state." His eyebrows lifted slightly, curious but not judgmental. "Would you mind telling me what this is about?" I paused, considering how much to share. Eventually, I gave him a brief but honest summary. I didn't play the victim, I gave him the facts. The financial abuse. The manipulation. The break-in. The stolen belongings. The letter. He listened. No interruptions. No pity. "Thank you for telling me," he said finally. "I'm sorry this happened to you. And for the record, your job is safe. You're doing great work here, and this office has no intention of getting involved in family drama." He smiled then, and it was the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. "I'm Michael, by the way. Michael Denman." That was the beginning. We started seeing more of each other, coffee breaks, office events, then proper dates. A quiet dinner here, a Sunday picnic there. He was gentle, steady, dependable. Nothing like the chaos I had grown up around. We built a friendship first, then something more. Within a year, we were married in a quiet courthouse ceremony. And for the first time in my life, I belonged to someone who didn't treat me like a resource. With my savings, I started scouting for a new house. I wanted to make a real home, something permanent. And then, like something out of a twisted novel, I found it, my mother's house. The same one she had given to Jeremy. It was on the market. I booked an appointment under my married name, and when I saw the house in person, I knew. It was mine. Not in sentiment, but in fact. I bought it. Paid for it in full. Signed the deeds as Mrs. S. Denman. We began renovations shortly after. Michael handled most of it while I focused on launching my consultancy. I wanted to work from home, to be a present wife, and maybe, soon, a mother. Then, one day, I decided to visit the house myself, just to see the final touches. That's when I saw him. Jeremy. He was standing in the kitchen talking to Michael. Boxes were already in the hallway. "It's not actually my house," I heard Michael saying. "It belongs to my wife. I'm just supervising." Jeremy laughed. "Yes, but you can make her rent it to me. I used to live here, you know." I only sold because I was broke. He turned around and saw me then. The shock on his face was almost comical. Summer, he said. What are you doing here? I smiled. I came to see my house. What do you mean, your house? This is our family house. Mummy gave it to me. Yes. And you sold it. To me. He blinked, confused. Wait, you're the buyer. You tricked me. I used my legal name. That's not trickery. His face darkened. Well, it's still in the family. I'll move in by the end of the week. You won't, I said calmly. You're not welcome here. That was when the greed I had come to know too well lit up in his eyes. You're my sister. If you acquire property, it belongs to the family. I don't even need to pay rent. Michael stepped forward, his tone hard. She is my wife. And this house is hers. If she says no, then it's no. Now leave. Jeremy stormed out, furious. A few days later, I got another visit. My parents. They had found my new address through Jeremy's copy of the transfer deed. They stood at my door, hollow-eyed and worn. But there was no apology in their voices, only demands. My father, as usual, got straight to the point. We were not aware that Jeremy was selling the house until it was done. He moved back in with us last year because he said he could not afford the maintenance costs. I advised him to rent it out. I didn't know he would sell it. My mother chimed in. Sharon, his girlfriend, just had her third child, that's 3 children in 3 years, and Jeremy's business has not gone according to plan. He is not making money. It is not surprising that he cannot afford the house. My mother was making his excuses. He is a big disappointment to me, my father said, ignoring her. But he is still my son. So why are you here? I asked. My parents looked at each other, and my mother spoke. You have to let Jeremy move into the house. We are having issues with Sharon, and with 3 children to cater to, it is becoming quite impossible. She refuses to do any housework, and I can no longer cope with cooking and cleaning for everyone. And I cannot afford it, said my father. I spent the last of my pension on this business which is now failing. And he just won't take my advice on how to run it. All I have left is the allowance you send each month, and that can barely buy enough food to feed all of us. I was quiet for a while before I answered them. I am a married woman now. I have discussed the matter with my husband and we have decided not to let the house to Jeremy. What is this marriage nonsense? Asked my father with irritation. When did you get married? As far as I am concerned, you are not married to that man, whoever he is, and that is final. This is the sort of thing that I was afraid would happen when you went to work away from home. Now you are bringing disgrace to my family by shacking up with some irresponsible man who is wicked enough to keep you in his house when your father's house is just around the corner. I could not let him finish. If my husband is irresponsible, then he is at least not worse than your own son. At least he has taken me to the registry and signed the register with witnesses. Jeremy has been living with Sharon for years, and now has 3 children, and you have not forced them to marry. Rather, you have been subsidizing them with money I send. Yet you come into my house to insult me. You are a girl, Sharon is a girl. I countered. If you feel so strongly about it, insist on their marriage too. As far as I am concerned, you have no further claim on me. You must leave that man, my father said. We do not recognize your marriage. As far as we are concerned, you are living in sin. My mother chimed in, he has separated you from your family. A man who turns a daughter against her parents is not a good man. I smiled, soft and tired. No. You turned me against you. He just gave me a reason to stay away. My father rose to his feet, his face dark with anger, and stormed out of the house. If Jeremy is a disappointment, you are a bigger disappointment to me. My mother spat, and followed my father out, banging the door shut as she did. I sat down and cried for a long time, then cradling the growing belly hidden under the folds of my baboo house dress, I put on some calming jazz music and danced away their painful words. They tried to argue. Tried to shame me. But it was too late. I was not theirs to control anymore. I had chosen myself. Chosen love. Chosen peace. And no matter what they said or did next, they would never be able to unchoose that for me. I started seeing a therapist, too. For the first time, I wanted to put my emotional well-being ahead of obligation. I wanted to learn how to draw boundaries without guilt, how to say no without fear. For months, I lived quietly. Alone, yes, but finally in peace. And then one morning, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. The writing was unmistakably my mother's. I stared at it for a long time before deciding whether to open it. Something told me it wasn't an apology, my mother didn't believe in those. But still, I was curious. And a little afraid. I slid my finger under the flap and unfolded the paper inside. It read. Summer. You have brought shame upon this family. If you continue on this path, you will end up alone. Remember, blood is thicker than water. Come home and beg your father's forgiveness before it is too late. Your mother. I folded it back up and placed it carefully in my desk drawer, where I kept other important documents, a reminder of who they were, and who I would never be again. I never wrote back. I never called. I didn't need to. I had finally learned, family is not defined by blood, but by love and respect. And if those things were absent, then so was any obligation I once believed I had. As the sun dipped low, casting golden beams through the living room windows, I stood in the silence that followed their exit. It wasn't the first time my parents had thrown hurtful words at me, but this time something was different. I didn't feel powerless. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like that little girl who once cried herself to sleep after giving up her new dress so Jeremy could have a pair of shoes he didn't need. I felt free. The house, my house, no longer felt haunted by their presence. It felt like home again, solid beneath my feet, warm around my shoulders. The child inside me kicked gently, and I smiled through my tears, rubbing my belly with slow, comforting circles. You'll never know what that kind of pain feels like, I whispered to my baby. Because I'll love you the way I was never loved. That night, I told Michael everything. Every word they'd said, every wound they tried to reopen. He listened without interrupting, without judgment. Then he held me until I fell asleep, my head tucked under his chin, safe at last. In the days that followed, the house bloomed even more. Michael painted the nursery pale green, and I picked out little animal prints and curtains with stars. We filled our evenings with plans for the future, baby names, midnight feeding shifts, family holidays. My heart swelled with a kind of peace I had never known. Still, there were whispers in the wind. I heard from a neighbor that Jeremy had tried to break into the house one evening, claiming it still belonged to him. But Michael had already installed new locks and a security system. The cameras caught Jeremy's confused, angry face, and later that week, a visit from the police ensured he wouldn't try it again. A few months after, my parents visited me again. This time their eyes shot open in surprise when they saw my huge belly. They looked even worse than they did the last time I saw them. My mother began to cry. Big sobbing, wailing tears. My father just stood there looking at her. Michael came running from the kitchen. Now that I was almost due, he was working from home. "What is going on?" he asked. "Who are these?" "My parents," I answered. "Oh, hi. Nice to meet you. Please stop crying and come in. I'm sure we can talk about whatever the problem is inside." His eyes were darting about, hoping that no neighbors were watching this midday drama. When they sat, Michael offered drinks. "Don't bother," my father said. "I don't think that either of us will be able to swallow it anyway. Jeremy has sold my house. I did not know about it until this morning when the new owners came." He took a long shuddering breath and continued. "He sold it 3 weeks ago, and has been living there with us, not saying a word." My mother began to wail again. "It's over," she cried. "We have no home, we have no money, we have nowhere to go. And he says he used the money to pay off his gambling debts. I didn't even know he gambled." We were all quiet as we tried to process the news. "Well, as for where to stay," said Michael, ever practical. "I have a small, 1-bedroom flat I bought some years ago. It is quite small, but it's fully furnished and neat. My last tenants just moved out. You can stay there. You only need to bring your clothes." Tears began to fall from my father's eyes. "It seems," he said quietly, "that I was wrong to support him over you all these years. I just created a monster. I'm sorry, Summer." They stayed for lunch, then Michael drove them home to pack, then took them to the flat where they would live for the foreseeable future. On the day my daughter was born, as I held her tiny, wrinkled face against my chest, I whispered a promise in her ear. "I will never sell you short. I will never make you pay for my mistakes. You are not here to carry anyone's burden but your own, and even that, I will help you carry." Michael kissed my forehead and called her by the name we'd chosen together, Amari. It meant strength, and I could think of no name more perfect. And as I looked into her eyes, wide and wise and full of tomorrow, I knew that this was the beginning of everything I had ever truly wanted. Not a house. Not a title. Not approval. Just peace. And I had found it. Finally. Now, when I sit on the porch with a warm cup of tea, watching my children run around the yard, I often find myself wondering how I survived it all. The lies, the betrayal, the emotional manipulation, the loneliness. But I did. And I did more than just survive, I thrived. Michael and I live a quiet, happy life now. Our children are growing up in a home where their voices matter, where love is not currency, and where dignity isn't something they need to fight for. My daughters are bold and bright, and my son is gentle and kind. I often look at them and feel a swell of pride, not because of what they've achieved, but because of who they are becoming. My parents are different people now. Humbled, quieter. The sharp edges have been softened, worn down by loss and time. There are still moments when I see the old them peeking through, but then I look at how my mother folds laundry with my girls, or how my father tells stories to my son, and I remind myself, change is hard, but not impossible. As for Jeremy, he made his choices. And I have made mine. I do not hate him. I do not wish him ill. But I do not welcome him into my life either. That door is closed. And it will stay closed until he learns the difference between entitlement and grace. Until then, I wish him healing, from a distance.